things like bacteria living throughout our digestive system. They are communicating with our brain, our immune system, our skin, our lungs, our liver. The research on the gut microbiome is making every practitioner sort of go, hold on a minute, I might need to consider the whole body here because the gut microbiome's effects are everywhere.
Dr.Emily Prpa is an award-winning nutrition scientist with a PhD from King's College London. She transforms gut-brain research into practical wellness tips, helping people live healthier every day.
What does it actually mean to have a healthy gut?
Gut health is defined as the absence of disease or discomfort in your gastrointestinal tract. Your gut is this 9 meters long tube that starts in your mouth all the way through to the exit at the other end.
So what role does diet play? And are there any foods that you would consider to be heroes or villains?
As a population, we are not eating enough fibre. If I could just bottle up fibre, I would literally be a gazillionaire.
Vaginal microbiome, why is it unhappy down there?
We don't know what a healthy vagina microbiome is. What is so frustrating, because women's health has been non-existent apparently in research, and they're 3 times more likely to experience poor mental health like anxiety and depression.
What are the 2 to 3 things anyone can start doing today to improve their gut health?
Oh, can I have 4?
Go for it. Welcome back to the Elle podcast, and today's guest is Emily Prpa. She's a registered nutritionist at Yakult, everyone's favourite drink. I'm going to give you the credentials because they're outstanding. She holds a PhD in nutritional sciences from King's College London, where she's also a visiting lecturer. Her research explores how the gut microbiome impacts various aspects of our health, and she's been published in high-impact scientific journals, and she's also presented internationally. So we're really lucky to have her, and I'm very excited to get down to the nitty-gritty of what's going on with our guts. Hi, Emily. How are you?
I am so well. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm excited to have you on. I virtually never have questions, but today I have questions because I sat in the hairdressers listening to everybody around me, and they always say, who you got on the pod today, Alyssa? And I said, I've got a gut health expert. What do you want to know? And we started typing down questions.
Here we go.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a woman of your caliber will have no worries answering these. So first of all, gut health is everywhere right now, like everywhere. We see it on marketing claims, on kind of every weird and wonderful product you can imagine. But what does it actually mean to have a healthy gut?
Such a good question. And actually this term gut health, in science and research, we weren't ever really using it. It's only really in the last few years that we actually defined it. So in the research, gut health is defined as the absence of disease or sort of discomfort in your gastrointestinal tract. So when I say to you the gut, what do you think about? Most people kind of like point to their stomach, right? Kind of think of their stomach area. But actually, your gut is this 9 meters long tube that starts in your mouth all the way through to the exit at the other end. And it's about 9 meters long. So if we put that into context,
massive,
huge. It's like, it's the equivalent of like 2 giraffes stacked on top of each other, or like 2 double-decker buses side by side. It's absolutely ginormous. And we used to just think that the gut was merely involved in the digestion of food. But now, in terms of what is a healthy gut, in science and research at least, we look beyond sort of the function of the gut, and we look now more at the gut microbiome, this community of microbes, things like bacteria, living throughout our digestive system. And really, the reason why gut health has boomed is because in the last 20 years is only really where we have started in any meaningful way to be able to measure these gut bacteria. And what has been so fascinating about that is that we're now discovering, actually, okay, these bacteria might be doing something way beyond digestion. And I think that premise feels new and exciting. But actually, if we look back at how we evolved as humans, we actually evolved on a microbial planet. So there was never a time where we existed without these microbes living inside of us. You know, our immune system, everything evolved alongside of them. You know, we're the invaders on this planet, not them. Because oftentimes people hear bacteria and they're like, that's the thing that makes us poorly. But actually now with all the research on the gut microbiome, we're going, hold on a minute. These bacteria have been with us the entire time. What are they doing for our health? And this is where it's starting to explode, because we are seeing that they are doing so much more than just simply digesting our food. They are communicating with our brain, our immune system, our skin, our lungs, our liver. Honestly, the list goes on. And so everyone is going, oh my goodness, I need to start looking after my gut health because everyone's telling me it's doing so much. And really the science is sort of telling us that it is.
You're absolutely not wrong. And it was something that I was really interested in. And then I thought, well, I think I'm all right now. But actually, this is something that you can't just like turn on and off. You've got to be looking after your gut all the time. Do you think it's like the number one thing that people should be focusing on?
I'm biased, so I'm gonna say yes, but I really do. I think in the Western world and modern sort of medicine, at least, we always think about, well, medics, and as we train, we specialize really quickly, even in nutrition, we figure, and as dietitians, we fixate on an organ. And when you're in the hospital, you are within a specific specialty. And what that means is that we are all in isolation and we never look at the body as a whole. The research on the gut microbiome is making every practitioner sort of go, hold on a minute, I might need to consider the whole body here, because the gut microbiome's effects are everywhere. So I think when we start thinking about health more holistically, and even, it frustrates me that we always have physical health and mental health as separate, because all we have is health, and we always think of the brain as separate to the body. But in light of the gut microbiome, we know that there is now this huge connection between the gut and the brain, and there's a two-way street going on, and that we can no longer sort of think in isolation anymore when it comes to our health. And it's really the gut that is kind of like at the epicenter of all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. When you were talking about the gut microbiome then and all these different bacteria that are living in there, in my head, I'm thinking like these little things that are like having a party. You know what I mean? And we want them to be happy, and they want to be in great environment themselves. And, we need to set them up for the win.
Absolutely.
Almost.
Yeah, absolutely. They are teeny tiny. When we're talking about microbes, they are so small you can't even see them with your naked eye. You're absolutely tiny. And the power that they have on our body and our health is absolutely phenomenal. This idea that, we obsess over all the big things in life, don't we? Dream big, go big, the bigger the better.
Yeah.
But actually it's all the little things in life that matter most. And I think the gut microbiome brings us back to that premise that, to live a long and happy life is keep the little guys happy, look after them, and they'll make sure that they're taking good care of you as well.
I literally, as you were talking, then I was thinking maybe I should really like optimize my life in a completely different way. Like, microbiome first. Like, what are you doing today to look after your microbiome? And if you actually lived your life on that premise, maybe you might get different outcomes in loads of different ways.
Possibly. I think, yeah,
I
possibly.
Definitely would.
I always say, when it comes to the gut microbiome, and I am fascinated by this research, I nerd out on it on a daily basis. And the science is really complicated. But actually, when it comes to practice of how can we have good gut health, it's actually incredibly easy. And well, I wouldn't say it's easy, it's simple. But oftentimes it's the simple things that go out the window when life gets a little bit too big, isn't it?
You're not wrong, definitely. Yeah, that's my problem. So that brings me greatly on to the next question. What are some of the most common misconceptions about gut health that you wish people would just stop believing?
I would say one thing that I always see is anytime anyone is like feeling like they've got a gut symptom, so bloating, possibly cramps, these kind of things, they are quick to take things out of their diet really quickly, and oftentimes without a dietitian or healthcare professional supporting them on this. And I just want to explain to people why this can be really detrimental in the long term when it comes to gut microbiome specifically. So your gut microbiome, this community of microbes, you were talking about how you want it to kind of flourish and these kind of things. And the way I love to describe it is with a rainforest analogy. If you imagine a rainforest, this is an ecosystem in complete harmony. It's in balance, and it's got lots of different plants, loads of different species all kind of flourishing together. And that's really what you're looking for when it comes to your gut microbiome. But everybody's gut microbiome is completely unique. So what your rainforest looks like will be completely different to mine. But when what your gut microbes like is for you to feed them with their favorite food. And so that they are all happy because they are they are fussy eaters. So as long as you're feeding them with lots of different fiber, that's their favorite stuff. They munch on it, break it down, and produce really useful substances for our body. Now, when you start taking food away, you are only then feeding a certain number and certain types of bacteria in your gut. So essentially, you're starving off a couple of species that are really important. So the next time you say if you take out gluten-containing cereals, gluten is usually the first one to go.
Yeah.
When you start taking that out and you take more of a restrictive approach to your diet, you starve off certain bacteria. So then when you do decide to go out for a pizza with your mates and you have that gluten in the pizza dough, you'll flare up because your body, your gut microbiome doesn't have the bacteria, those skillful bacteria that are able to break down those gluten-containing fibers anymore. And so that's when your symptoms get exacerbated. But it might not have been the gluten. It's simply, it's kind of feeding into now, like you're almost creating the intolerance for yourself. So I would say, forgetting sort of restrictive diets and really thinking about how gut health is all about inclusion, not exclusion. I sort of always say that a gut health diet is no food is ever off the table long term. People take restrictive diets and start doing FODMAP on their own. These are very high FODMAP foods, things like onion and garlic. And they think that they should be on that diet that is incredibly restrictive and honestly very difficult to do. Pretty much for the rest of their life, they think, but actually, when you work alongside a dietitian, that all gets reintroduced very slowly and we find out what your triggers are. And so I would, encourage people not to just start taking things out willy-nilly. If they aren't able to see a dietitian for some reason, they might not be able to through the NHS, the wait time might be too long, or they can't fork it out themselves to see someone privately. I would say do it, take maybe gluten out for a week. And if you don't see any benefits in your symptoms, put it back in and maybe try something else, but don't just start taking things out all the time.
Okay, I'll tell you what else is really trendy, and a lot of my friends go, oh yeah, I'm just going to get one of those intolerance tests. And I'm like, I don't think they're worth the paper they're printed on.
There is no test at all that can diagnose an intolerance. So even, I think it's called the York test. You will see that they got slammed a couple of years ago by the ASA, saying that, because clinically there is no test, and they were stamping all over their website that we can diagnose all your intolerances, et cetera, et cetera. The way their test works is if you've eaten pistachios the day before, it's going to come up that you are intolerant to pistachios.
Because it recognises it in there.
Exactly.
I've always said this.
Exactly.
I'm like, don't waste your money.
And what you'll see on their website now is that they have like the test and then a little asterisk, and it will say at the bottom, like, we cannot actually diagnose any intolerance. It's on their website, but it's this teeny tiny little subscript at the bottom. So intolerance tests, don't do them. There's a big difference between an allergy, of course, and an intolerance. A food allergy, provokes an inflammatory response. Think Hitch, Hitch when he flares up, eat shrimp. That is a clear allergy. And of course, go and get the proper allergy test from your GP if you feel that is happening. But that will be something, swollen lips, these kind of things is a real, anaphylactic sort of shock in your body. There's a big difference. Intolerance, there is no test that can define that for you.
Okay, so at the opposite end of the spectrum, what if you get people who eat something like bread and then they're just like, getting like IBS symptoms and, I think negative symptoms?
Yeah, maybe we can talk about IBS for a bit. So IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, not to be confused with the inflammatory bowel disease, IBD. So IBS, it affects around 10 to 20% of the population. And it's actually, I was about to say recently, but it was actually 2016, so not that recently anymore, but reclassified as a disorder of the gut-brain axis. So the gut-brain axis refers to the scientifically proven link and two-way communication between the gut and the brain. So your brain is talking to all the organs and systems in your body, but your gut is talking back to your brain. And any time that you felt butterflies in your stomach or sick to your stomach before a work presentation or coming on a podcast like this, that's real life examples of your gut-brain axis at play. And in terms of the research, like we rely a lot on animal studies, but in IBS is where we see the gut-brain axis really at play in real time, because individuals with IBS, and it affects far more women than it does men. And it will be anything from severe constipation to diarrhea, pain, bloating. And actually a lot of the kind of like scale as to be diagnosed for IBS does rely on pain a lot of the time. But what we see in these patients is that their symptoms worsen during periods of stress and anxiety, and they're 3 times more likely to experience poor mental health like anxiety and depression. So now when it comes to these sort of symptoms that you were referring to, we don't just target the diet anymore. We can actually start targeting the brain side of things. And we see that hypnotherapy, breath work, yoga, these sort of somatic exercises through breath work, stimulating our vagus nerve, which connects our gut to our brain, can help alleviate symptoms for individuals with IBS. So I think that's amazing to see that these more like what you'd consider Eastern practices are now being part of our sort of modern medicine, which I think
it's very inexpensive to do. I mean, you can just go on YouTube, watch a breathwork video, or I mean, it's nice to do yoga, isn't it, in a class, but you could just watch yoga at home.
Completely. I think our breath is something that we have on us in our toolbox at every step of the way, every moment of the day, and we completely underutilize it. And I am someone who is incredibly, I'm an academic. I am like evidence. Yeah. But for growing up, I was brought up, my mum brought me up on homeopathy, and I'm someone who has practiced yoga from a really young age and breathwork meditation. And for a really long time, I really hid that away. I was kind of like, oh, don't mention that to anyone. And now, the more I study, I'm like, oh, wow, this all makes sense as to why I've now come into gut health. And when we look at stress and the gut-brain axis, what I'll tell you is cortisol and our stress hormone, it wreaks havoc throughout our body, right? And your body has this hierarchy whereby cortisol will override every other hormone. So things like melatonin, our sleep hormone, which is why when we're stressed, we never sleep because cortisol is pumping through, melatonin's not getting a look in, you're not going to get to sleep. The only thing then, in terms of that hierarchy, that will override cortisol is our vagus nerve, this nerve that connects our gut to our brain. And when we stimulate our vagus nerve, and the only way we can do that is with our breath, it sends us into rest and digest as opposed to fight or flight, which is what we are always in these days. And I'm just like, wow, that is something that we can tap into every step of the way. And we never do it. So for gut health, it's one that we can really start to hone in on.
And it's not something that's like, quote unquote, scientific, but it's something that you feel better. It's undeniable. You feel better.
Totally.
Doing it. So, yeah.
I know. And I just think, we track everything.
Yeah,
and
I know.
But yeah, when it comes to stress, and I'm not someone that, it's not realistic to say never be stressed. Stress is what gets us out of bed in the morning. It gives us the motivation to go out there and live our best lives. It's not about flatlining, but it's about managing our stress, and really stress, it impacts inflammation in the body. It impacts our heart health through our blood pressure, and it absolutely impacts our gut health. So it will go on to disrupt the balance of bacteria in our gut. So it will tip the scales towards more of the bad bacteria rather than the good in this state that we call dysbiosis in the science. And it will, I don't know if you've experienced it on a day-to-day, say if you have a meal one day and you feel totally fine. That day was a good day, everything ran as planned. But the next day you have the same meal, but the kids were screaming at you from start to finish. You were stuck in traffic, emails coming out of your hair, podcast guest is late. It's all just back to back, non-stop, just nothing going right. You have that same meal. You might start experiencing gut symptoms, bloating, maybe a bit of constipation, these kind of things. It has nothing to do with the food that you ate, but everything to do with your mindset at the time.
When I get particularly anxious, and I can remember a time, it wasn't too long ago, a couple of months ago, particularly anxious, like really stressed about something work-wise. And I mean, to the point of puking, really bad. And I remember putting it on Instagram and saying like, God, I could puke today. Do you know what I mean? So stressed and everything. And one lady said, that's adrenaline. If you feel like you're about to puke because you're that stressed, that is too much cortisol, too much adrenaline. And I just will not eat. I can go long periods, especially if I'm stressed, and I just will not eat at all. I feel like I'm so full. Do you know what I mean? That feeling, that is definitely the gut-brain axis in overdrive.
It absolutely is. Yeah.
Because other people, my partner, for instance, he gets stressed and he eats. And I'm like, how can you eat at a time like this?
Well, what's
I'm the absolute opposite. I'm like, I would starve for 3 days if I'm that stressed.
What's interesting, I'm more similar to you as well. But what is interesting is when we are in that kind of stress response, we're in our fight or flight, which, if people aren't aware, this is the nervous system that was really useful back in the day when we were cavemen. It helped us run away from a tiger, for example. Whereas nowadays, it starts, firing up when we've got 10 unread emails or whatever and things are starting to go wrong. We don't have the threat of the tiger, but we have other different threats that trigger it. And when we're in that state, our brain is in survival mode. It is going constantly just figuring out, okay, what are the reasons that I could be about to die? And back then, when our brain was evolving, starvation was a threat to survival. So in your partner's case, at least, it's that his brain is going, oh my goodness, like I need high energy food and quickly sort of thing. So that's why he'll be sort of eating. And it will be also like, when you wake up, and a lot of people, when they've had a bad night's sleep, they tend to eat more sort of high energy foods. So, yeah. And it's because their cortisol levels are higher. And that's how not sleeping enough can impact your dietary choices, because you start going towards more high energy food because your brain is going, we need quick energy fuel now because, we might need to go leg it from a tiger in a minute. So it's that kind of mechanism at play.
Yeah, definitely. Whenever I have a bad night's sleep, it's like I'll just eat and eat and eat the next day. And you're picking up grenade bars that I would never normally eat, and toast and, everything I don't like.
It's a good day.
Yeah. I never let her eat anyway. Okay, that's so interesting. So what role does diet play? And are there any foods that you would consider to be heroes or villains?
Oh, I love that question. I love the heroes and villains. So yeah, when it comes to gut health, and let's talk about, when we're talking about gut health in this context, we're talking about, okay, how do we create that rainforest inside of us? And there are a number of factors that impact the diversity of your gut microbiome. Some that we don't have control over, like age and genetics and medications. And I know we might touch on those later. So things that we can't control can impact our gut microbiome. Age being that it can reduce our gut microbiome diversity because things like our immune system weakens. But then there are things that we can have more control over: diet and lifestyle. Lifestyle is things like stress that we've touched on, sleep as well, and exercise. But diet, I'm a nutritionist, so I'm going to argue, it is the most important sort of modifiable factor which determines which bacterial species reside in our gut. And when it comes to creating that rainforest, I always say there isn't a silver bullet, but if one thing came close, it would be fiber. And as a gut health nutritionist, I am just banging that drum every single day. As a population, we are not eating enough fiber. For anyone that doesn't know what fiber is, it is essentially the backbone of plant foods. So when I say plant foods, most people just think, okay, fruits and vegetables. And yes, fruits and vegetables, great sources of fiber, but actually the highest sources of fiber are things like whole grains. So whole grain pastas, whole grain rice, whole grain bread, legumes. So beans, pulses, lentils, as well as even nuts and seeds are great sources of fiber. And I always say, if I could just bottle up fiber, I would literally be a gazillionaire, because there is...
I think you could.
Yeah. Well, no. Well, in terms of what your gut bacteria, how it likes it from Mother Nature, the way it is grown in plants. But if there was a drug that could do, if I could share with you the research of what fiber does in terms of our health, I mean, even beyond gut health, there isn't a single drug on the planet that can achieve these kind of results. So there was a study that culminated like over 250 studies together. And it showed that just those individuals who ate more fiber, specifically just increasing their fiber by 8 grams a day, so like half a tin of chickpeas, say, they had a significantly reduced risk of colon cancer, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, even death from all causes. And that varied between 5 and 30%. There's another study that shows just 5 grams more a day of fiber significantly reduces your risk of depression. Those kind of results, there isn't a drug, one single drug that can do that. And it's quite phenomenal. In terms of our gut, the fiber, as humans, when we eat these sort of foods, we can't digest fiber. So what happens is it stays intact throughout our digestive system until it reaches our colon, where the majority of our gut bacteria live. Gut bacteria go off and they munch on it. It's their favorite food, right? And they break it down into these really useful substances called short-chain fatty acids. And short-chain fatty acids are just of our health. They go off and have really powerful anti-inflammatory effects. And so what you're doing when you're eating fiber is you are feeding your gut bacteria, and they are having the party that you mentioned earlier. They are just rallying each other up, bringing in more mates, inviting more people to the party, and they are creating that ecosystem. So fiber is definitely up there in terms of getting as many different fiber foods, those 6 foods that I mentioned: fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, even herbs and spices can go a bit of a way as well. And so getting as much variety in as possible is going to make sure that all your gut bacteria are being fed, because as I mentioned, they're all kind of like fussy eaters. So fiber's one. And then I would say sprinkling in maybe some fermented foods might also be another little string to your bow. So fermented foods, unlike fiber, where we're feeding our already existing gut bacteria in our gut, we are sort of cheating by trying to take in the good live bacteria already. So fermented foods are things like fermented milk drinks, live yogurt, all your kombuchas, your kimchi, sauerkraut, all of those sort of trendy foods at the moment when you go into the supermarket and you can't miss them. They're sort of the fermented foods that can also add to increased diversity into your gut.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And yeah, as you're talking then, I'm thinking, okay, yeah, what am I going to have for tea? And I need to be having the broccoli and this, that and the other. Funnily enough, I really do like obsess about my daughter's gut health, mainly because she had a cesarean birth. Now, the reason I hung on so long in labour for 48 hours was because I was determined for her to have a vaginal birth because of all those germs and the microbiome and everything. And all I kept thinking about was that. I kept thinking, she needs these germs. I'm not giving up. And it literally went on for 2 days. And for the end, they were like, it needs to happen now. You're having an emergency C-section. We need to get her out. So then because she was a C-section baby, I was really obsessed and still am with, her gut health and stuff. Is that right to be that way?
So I think this is a great, thank you for sharing that. And I get asked this a lot. I do a lot of talks and a lot of mothers will put their hand up when I share, the factors that can impact the gut microbiome throughout the life course. And absolutely, mode of delivery can impact the gut microbiome, particularly for the infant. But actually, although, I saw headlines as well that kind of scare people around this and being like, have I done something wrong by having a C-section? Have I impacted them and their child? And it's like, actually, let's look at what the research shows. All it shows is that the gut microbiomes of these babies are different when it comes from from a vaginal pregnancy to a C-section. It just shows that they're different. And actually, it's that window of opportunity is in the first 3 years of life. So if you really want to kind of impact their gut microbiome, that's when, once they start eating solids, that's when you can start really actually changing the gut microbiome. It becomes quite stable after 3 years, actually. So yeah, within the first 3 years, you've got ample opportunity to start feeding them with all these fiber foods that will start, changing their rainforest. So I know everyone gets quite hung up on it. And I think that as researchers, we need to be better at communicating what this research shows. So I think that, I want women to kind of feel like it's okay. And, I haven't screwed anything up here and we're giving them still the best opportunity, especially in those first 3 years.
I wouldn't have maybe hung on so long.
No, exactly.
You know what I mean? I would have been maybe after about 12 or 15 hours like, okay, yes, I'll agree to it now.
And you're going to slobber them in kisses when they come out. And that's
exactly.
Good. Yeah, exactly.
Well, so I used to put probiotics and stuff inside her bottles then. Do you know what I mean? And then I paid a fortune. It was like 80 quid from America for this like all singing, all dancing one, which probably wasn't. If I spoke to you, you'd be like, you don't need it. But I was, became a bit like, I was a bit anxious about that, if I'm honest. Yeah. This is a question that always comes up and something that I always think about if I have to have antibiotics. How do antibiotics or long-term medications affect the gut health and can the damage be reversed?
Great question. So antibiotics, life-saving treatments, if your GP is telling you to take them, absolutely take them. But let's just talk about what they are. So antibiotics, particularly what gets prescribed here in the UK, are broad spectrum antibiotics, which basically means that when you're poorly, those antibiotics, they don't just wipe out the bad bacteria that's making you poorly, they'll also take out some of the good. Now, if you take antibiotics and you have that rainforest analogy to begin with, and the antibiotics come along, they might take out a few plant species, maybe a couple of birds, you're not really going to notice so much. And that means when you come off your antibiotics, you might be able to bounce back far quicker and become back to that kind of like stable ecosystem. One thing that we do see in the research is that probiotics, so specific strains of bacteria that have been extensively studied and have the evidence to show this, can actually help maintain your rainforest if you take them alongside the antibiotics. But they need to be taken at the point that you start the antibiotic, not halfway through the course. We don't see them to be effective if you start taking them, 3 days in, sort of thing. So in terms of the bounce back, I would say as long as you're looking after your gut health at the beginning, before sort of you do have an infection and might need antibiotics, then you will be able to kind of like bounce back far quicker. If, say, I live in London, I've got like a patch of grass coming out, so like that's my garden. If I take a course of antibiotics and the patch of grass goes missing, I'm massively going to notice the difference, and it's going to take me a lot longer to build up. So yes, you absolutely can start rebuilding it. It's just going to take a little bit longer.
Okay, that's brilliant. And then that brings me on to my next question. So I see it everywhere, like probiotics, prebiotics. Are they actually necessary, or like are they just being trendy?
Great question. So let's talk about the difference between them, because I think people also get confused. Pre, what's going on? So probiotics, they are, and also I think because let's talk about what's the difference between like probiotics and just taking like fermented food like kombucha and things like this. So probiotics, I'll give you the scientific definition, are live microbes that when consumed in like sufficient quantities can confer a health benefit on the human body. So they're like the good live bacteria. They're extensively studied and they're specific strains. So taking one specific bacteria, say. Then fermented foods. So all the things on the shelf that you see at the moment, Greek yogurt, all of those, kombucha, they are even, let's put in bread and wine and beer. These are all fermented foods by definition. So it just simply means that they have undergone fermentation during the industrial process. They don't necessarily mean that the bacteria is live when you take them. So anyone looking to get bang for their buck, when you take these, when you're taking more of the food approach, make sure that on the bottle it says, might say it contains, certain bacteria. For example, in Yakult, we have our unique bacteria in there. So it might say that. And you'd want to make sure that they have evidence that it kind of reaches the gut alive. These are great things to know that you're getting bang for your buck when you take fermented foods from on the shelf. And then prebiotics are like the food for your bacteria. They are specific substrates that feed your already existing good bacteria in your gut. And when your gut then breaks down these prebiotic fibers, they produce useful substances. So they're kind of like the three different ones. So probiotics are live bacteria. Prebiotics are like the fertilizer for the bacteria to kind of grow in your rainforest.
Your rainforest and your like
exactly
your fertilizer. Yeah,
exactly that. And so I think when it comes to are they worth it? From a clinical standpoint, probiotics can be really useful in certain conditions. And for certain individuals, absolutely. And they can also be like a good helping hand for kind of supporting your gut health. That time when life is getting a bit busy and you're like, what can I do for my gut health today? Maybe it is taking a probiotic, taking a fermented milk drink, these kind of things. So prebiotics, you can find them a lot in, again, those kind of high fiber foods, onion, garlic, great sources, as well as like asparagus, tomatoes. Food first approach can be fantastic. There is also research that certain prebiotics can be fantastic for like immunity when you're buying them more in like the supplement form. But again, one thing about kind of specifically probiotics when people are thinking about taking one is that, the definition I said, they can have this health benefit on the body. I would recommend individuals to go and look at the supplement that they want to take or the brand that they're thinking of taking and seeing if they have research on a particular health benefit that the person is trying to achieve. But yes, ultimately, the reason why this space gets really complicated is because, how I mentioned our gut microbiomes are completely unique to us. So it's only ever 40% the same as anybody else's. And that's even true for identical twins. What that means is, I'm sorry, I revert to kind of a football analogy when I explain this because I grew up with two older brothers. So go with me here. But if you imagine your gut microbiome is this football team and say, it's doing okay, but it hears of like this player that's just going to be like their golden boot. So they hear of like Messi and Ronaldo. These would be like your probiotics strains like lactobacillus and bifidobacteria. So what you do is you fork out your money and you go buy it. And what you're expecting to happen is that Messi comes into the side and he just fits in great with the team and scores goal after goal, aka hello health benefit, and you've got what you wanted. But sometimes a player comes into the side, so you take your probiotic or your fermented food, whatever it might be, and the new kind of bacteria just doesn't mesh well with the already existing team. So the Messi might not get the ball in the first place to be able to stick it in the back of the net. And this is where this research just gets really complicated when we say, like, which probiotic should I take? It's kind of a bit of a case by case. You want to just make sure it's working for you. And I always say to people, they aren't this overnight. They're not like a painkiller where you take it and all of a sudden, your gut's fantastic. I would say at least take it for 12 weeks. If you don't see any benefit, maybe speak to a nutritionist, dietitian, or maybe just try another one and see if you see a benefit or something that you're looking for.
A lot of things came up for me then when you were talking, and that's a great analogy about the messy thing, and you're absolutely right. And I always say this with supplementation, you've got to give it time. You know what I mean? It can't just be done for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever. Give it time. You've got to let things settle. 90 days, 12 weeks, maybe even a little bit longer. But yeah. So we were talking about before, you were saying that fiber is like an absolute hero. So what about people who are just like, the carnivore diet is super trendy at the moment, and they are just literally removing every bit of fiber. And then you've got like people like Paul Saladino, who's like, oh, there's things in broccoli that are making you inflame and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, this instinctively to me feels incorrect. I don't know if you know this about me, but I lived on a desert island for 6 weeks. And I'll tell you what, out of that 6 weeks, how many times do you think I actually ate meat? I'll tell you, I lived exactly how we were supposed to live. So I was grazing on beach almonds and coconuts and, fish, or if you could get one, you know what I mean? Plant food all the time, nuts if you could find them. In 6 weeks, we got one piece of meat. So out in the wild, it would be inconceivable to be eating meat 3 times a day, 4 times a day for every single meal. It would just be impossible. And I do not believe that we've evolved to do that. It's just inconceivable. There's another guy on social media who is literally selling the dream of like, yeah, you can reverse cancer with the carnivore diet. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, literally, what are you talking about? Because I am somebody who's literally lived and breathed how we were meant to live 6 weeks long.
Ship them all off to the desert island.
Yeah, I honestly felt like saying that to him. I would take him to task over this and say, I'll tell you what, let's go and put you on the Pearl Islands and see how you crack on and see what you managed to get in 6 weeks. Yeah. So the carnivore diet, super trendy.
Yeah, in the bin over here, specifically for gut health. But look, the thing about it is, so carnivore diet, it's predominantly meat, fish, eggs, bit of dairy. And like you say, it is stripping away all of that plant food that really provides huge diversity for our gut microbiome. We absolutely know that. When it comes to nutrition science, we don't have a lot that's black and white, but there's something that we absolutely know, and that fiber is, a one-way ticket to.
You wouldn't be so attracted to it. You know what I mean? I look at fruit and like bananas and mangoes, and I'm like, ooh, that looks amazing. Like, there's a reason I'm instinctively pulling towards it.
Absolutely. And I wonder, when diets become like this and they're restrictive, the frustrating thing is that people, if they are having gut symptoms and then they all of a sudden take everything out of their diet, yeah, okay, they might feel better in the short term, but actually the long-term effects of this diet is what worries me. Largely it's unknown, but I am concerned in terms of, gut health, and particularly sort of like colon health when I look at the composition of this diet particularly. So I would tread with caution over it for sure.
I just think don't do it. If anybody's thinking about doing it, don't do it. It's stupidity. The other thing that threw up to me yesterday, and I was reading this in the Daily Mail yesterday, don't shoot me. There has been an explosion in colon cancer in the young. What do you think? What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's colon cancer, and the boom of it is incredibly worrying. And I think that, if we can get more messaging out there around a plant, increasing plant diversity sort of a diet would certainly help, increasing our fiber. We know in the UK we are absolutely falling short of what we should be eating in terms of fiber amounts, 30 grams, and no one's doing that. The majority of us are having about 18. So
I don't think I do. Do you do it?
I think I do, but it's a real conscious effort.
Yeah.
Maybe not today because I'm on the go,
exactly.
But it's only when I'm really, at home.
It's difficult, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. I mean, I do try, if I'm making a curry or something like that, I put in chickpeas, kidney beans, things like that, haricot beans, try and bulk things out.
Definitely. It's all about kind of like little swaps. So, and I think when it comes to fiber, if anyone's eating currently 5 grams and is now like, I need to eat 30 and goes all of a sudden up to 30, they're going to be like, I listened to this woman and she doesn't know what she's talking about. I feel terrible. I get it. I hear you. Just come back to this point in the podcast where I remind you to go low and slow, and also keep drinking a lot of water, because fiber draws water into the bowel. Yeah, there we go. Fiber draws water into the bowel. So you need more of it to, put it nicely, keep everything ticking through really smoothly. But also I just want to add there, because like you said, adding, your chickpeas into your curries and things, really small little swaps can go great. Can go really far way in terms of increasing our fiber amount. So if you're someone that always snacks on cashew nuts, can you make it mixed nuts? If you're only ever buying like the red pepper, buy the bag with all the different colored peppers. If you only ever put raspberries on top of your porridge, can you do mixed berries and these kind of things? Little swaps can go a long way when it comes to upping our fiber and increasing plant diversity in our diet.
Yeah, definitely. That is something I'm more conscious of, and like just hide it from the kids as well. Like put mushrooms in with like the chili,
great,
kidney beans.
Also cheap as chips, that stuff.
Yeah, of course
Get
it is.
Get it in there, bulk it out.
Yeah, but if they knew, then they would, you know what they're like. Okay, so our audience is very predominantly female of a certain age. So how do hormones impact gut health, especially in women over 30 and during perimenopause and menopause?
Great question. Love this. Let's go for another hour. Let's just talk about this.
I wish we could. We've got another half an hour, to be fair.
So I love talking about women's health, especially sort of our menstrual health, because it is such a fantastic indicator of our health, and yet we never have the language and body literacy to know how to talk about it. So absolutely, our gut and our hormones are interlinked. So estrogen and progesterone are 2 sort of key reproductive hormones. And just to mention, I'm sure you've probably spoken about this on the podcast, whenever we think about these hormones, particularly estrogen, everyone's like reproduction, but actually estrogen is involved with our mood, our bone health, our heart health, our libido, our weight, everything, metabolism. When we say, we're so hormonal, it's like, yes, we are. And thank goodness we are, it's doing so much for us. But when it comes to our gut and how our hormones are linked, well, actually our gut, the hormone receptors for estrogen and progesterone are lined on the gut. So that means during your menstrual cycle, for example, your bowel habits change. So during ovulation, particularly become where progesterone is starting to increase, it sort of slows down transit time. So you probably become a little bit more like harder stools, maybe a little bit of constipation. Whereas during menses and menstruation is when you particularly have looser stools. So period poops often kind of come up. And I think it's really important for women and younger girls to understand that bowel habits change through our cycle. And oftentimes people start thinking like, do I have IBS all of a sudden? And it's like, no, actually, we just need to understand that our gut and our bowel habits will change with our monthly cycle. And what is amazing is the research that is coming out on how, particularly sort of later in life, our gut bacteria is really involved in metabolizing our estrogen levels. So particularly later in life, when our estrogen levels start dropping, perimenopause, and if we start thinking proactively about when we are about to transition into menopause, that actually focusing on our gut microbiome and our gut microbiome diversity might help us have an easier sort of menopause, at least what that research is showing. And this is because in women, there is this unique collection of bacteria known as the estrobolome. So there's a small amount of them in male, but once we reach puberty, that's where our estrobolome becomes bigger, more bacteria involved in the estrobolome. And what it is these bacteria can actually reactivate estrogen. So what happens when estrogen goes throughout the body is it passes through liver, it then is funny things happen during this process, and then it goes to the gut to hopefully be excreted out. But these bacteria can actually deconjugate some of the added things that the liver does to the estrogen. So the estrogen is free again. So these bacteria make it so that estrogen can go back up into your bloodstream and up some of your estrogen levels, which is amazing for menopause, because that's when it all starts dropping. And that's when we start having symptoms, hot flushes and things like this. So what the research is now saying is like, okay, if we can target this estrobolome or increase our gut microbiome diversity, will it help alleviate menopausal symptoms? Because we can help hopefully keep some of our estrogen levels up. And I think that's amazing, because so often as women, we're always looking outside of ourselves when it comes to our health. And HRT is like the first port of call when it comes to managing menopausal symptoms. And it's like, hold on a minute, there's actually a machinery inside of us that maybe we could tap into. And at the moment, no one's talking about it. So yeah, I love that question. And I'm really excited to see where sort of the gut hormone axis research goes. And I think that there might be a real role for kind of gut microbiome sort of intervention to help us through that life stage.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
I mean, I was reading in a longevity book maybe last week, but it was like you can delay the menopause for a couple of years by changing your diet, or at least definitely reduce the symptoms, reduce the signs of it. Great omega-3s, long-chain fatty acids, etc. And obviously women who have a more refined carbohydrate diet, perhaps not so much fibre, are going to have more severe symptoms, it said.
One last thing on the women's health, because the one thing I sort of didn't mention was around sort of fertility and the gut microbiome link, and especially sort of conditions that cause kind of at risk of infertility, like PCOS and endometriosis. Because when we look at these individuals, they do tend to have this kind of gut dysbiosis, where they have this tipping of the scales towards more of the bad bacteria rather than the good. And there's research looking at the effect of sort of probiotics as an intervention for these individuals. And there's some promising results, but even in terms of fertility, for both male and female, we see that gut dysbiosis is sort of associated with infertility, but we don't have this causal relationship at the moment. But it is interesting. It kind of comes back to what we were saying at the beginning, how the gut is kind of the home of everything right now.
Yeah, I mean, I speak to so many girls with PCOS or endometriosis or sometimes both. So, I mean, from your perspective, would you be definitely recommending you need to be really focusing on your gut health? It can, if not anything else, really alleviate some of your symptoms?
I would. So for PCOS, I would say a diet that is focused on
Is there any
gut health.
particular strain that you should look at?
In terms of the research, the strains that kind of come out on top, at least it's more so in terms of the inflammatory markers for PCOS is where we're seeing sort of benefit. And the most studied strains are lactobacillus and bifidobacteria, but we're not at a point at the moment where we can absolutely say for sure, but that's just because they're simply the most studied. For endo, I would say yes, diet, particularly an anti-inflammatory diet. And I would say that some of the research that's come out lately is kind of confirming that gluten can be a huge sort of trigger for symptoms for people with endo. So gut health focus, but also looking at kind of a gluten-free diet for endo as well.
Definitely, 1,000,000%. Something that cropped up in my head then, this could be out of your realms of expertise.
Go on.
But let's talk about it. So vaginal microbiome is obviously huge. We get lots of questions from ladies who've got loads of issues like thrush, BV. And I looked into this at one point a long time, and I ended up in Denmark chatting to some guy, and like, God knows, I don't know, really down a rabbit hole for like weeks on it, looking at all different strains. And then you've got products on the market which are vaginal probiotics. And I thought, is this any good or is it not? Is it actually doing something? If you're swallowing a tablet, is it even staying alive to get to that point? I don't know. Explain it to me.
Great question. So there is this idea, the theory of the gut vagina axis as well. So if taking a probiotic, does it change our microbiome in our vagina? Well, I don't have a clear-cut answer. What we do know is that there does seem to be this axis going on, an interplay between our gut microbiome and our vagina microbiome. If we take antibiotics, we know that this is the case because those antibiotics, a lot of women will start experiencing thrush, and that is because the antibiotics aren't just wiping out the bacteria in the gut, but they're also taking out some in the vagina microbiome as well. So we know that there could be an interplay. What is so frustrating, because women's health has been non-existent apparently in research, that we don't know what a healthy vagina microbiome is. I know we don't really have it for gut health, but even more so, we don't even have the samples when it comes to a healthy vagina microbiome. Everything that we have on the vagina microbiome is really in diseased states. So we'll take a swab when women have come in with an infection, for example. So we don't really have anything. There's one study being done in Belgium. It's called the Isola study that is starting, 6,000 women, and it's quite amazing. They've got women in 3 different generations in families being part of this study, just showing like how much women are prepared to kind of give up their body and time for the sake of research, so that we can feel more empowered and have the the knowledge that we need when it comes to our health. But yeah, the vagina microbiome, it is a whole other thing that we still don't know enough about. But yeah, this idea that can the bacteria translocate from the gut to the vagina, there is some emerging research to say yes. Other researchers, if they ever listen to this, will be like, no, it doesn't. We don't know that yet. So
I mean, there's a lot of products on the market that are claiming that it does, you know? It's, I know when I've had thrush in the past, then it triggers me to like look into it and like, you know, end up down rabbit holes everywhere. But yeah, I'm a bit like, well, is this actually working, or what's causing it in the first place? Why is it unhappy down there? You know, what was the difference? And, you know, who knows?
And we need all of this. We need to understand the factors that impact the the vagina microbiome, you know, from the knickers that we wear to the condoms that we use to all of it.
To your partner.
Absolutely.
The first place I look is I'm like, have you put shower gel on that? Because you are upsetting my vaginal microbiome.
Yeah. I saw a lube the other day that was like the first one that was like for your vagina microbiome. And I was like, I've never even thought about that.
Well, I actually have, right? I actually have, which is why, because obviously if there's something wrong with me, then I need to try and fix it. And if there's a problem with me, it must be a bigger problem in the world. And that's, I don't know, my entrepreneurial spirit coming out. And I'm like, great, if I want this, there must be other women out there that. So that's why I ended up in Denmark doing, you know, so much stuff, because this company was actually doing some incredible work. It's another thing on my to-do list, don't get me wrong. But yeah, and then obviously you hit menopause, everything gets drier down there. There must be a huge, the estrogen's dropping, there must be a huge shift in, you know, your microbiome. Just as you're getting older and you say that your gut microbiome is changing, it must be changing down there too. And again, should we be repopulating it? I'm also seeing probiotics in skincare. This is another big trend.
Yes, so your skin has a microbiome.
Okay, so then I was like, well, this maybe should be part of our myth busting, but is it, you know, can you get topical probiotics and are they beneficial, or is it just like, no, it's not going to absorb, it's not going to do anything?
It's hard to say. One thing I will tell you is Yakult, as a Japanese company, we have loads of products out in Japan. We don't have so much here, but they have a skincare range. And I'll tell you how that came about, because they were kind of like pioneers in that space. No one had really thought to do it. And it was because originally Yakult was delivered in little glass bottles. And the ladies that were then re-washing the bottles every time after the delivery, they noticed that their hands had got really soft. And they were like, could this be because of the bacteria in Yakult? And so they went into a whole skincare range. So I don't know in terms of absolutely the science on the topical side of things, because I'm focused more sort of on the oral probiotics and prebiotics and things. And there is emerging research to show that, they could be useful in certain skin conditions. In terms of a lot of skin conditions, like even premature aging, but eczema, rosacea, acne, they're all inflammatory in nature. And so with your gut microbiome being so closely linked to your immune system and helping to sort of dampen that inflammatory response, it could be that, you know, by utilizing sort of probiotics, prebiotics, and a diet that's diverse in fiber and all the foods that your gut microbiome love, it could have an effect on your skin health.
No, I completely agree with you. And as you were talking then, I was thinking about, your skin and eczema and things like that. You know, when everybody only talks about it, I'm like, well, have you considered changing your diet a bit? You know, if you're getting, I always think your skin is like an alarm system. There's something going on internally. I know this myself, this is a gross story, but I'm going to tell it. I once had a tampon stuck inside me that I didn't realize was inside me. Every single morning I would wake up with like spots all over my chin, like big ones. And I was like, what the hell is going on? This is really unusual for me. Anyway, it must have been in there 6 days. I could have had toxic shock syndrome. It was absolutely awful. Anyway, it was right up there. I don't know what I'd done. I'd obviously put 2 in at one point and, you know, things happen. So, and I thought, wow, that's proof to me that there was something going wrong with your body. It's shown me on my skin, alarm. There's an alarm going off here. Honestly. So whenever anybody's suffering with like bad skin health, acne, I'm like, I would start with fixing your gut.
Yeah, start from within. I think, you're right. It is a great indicator of things that are going on in your body. I would agree with that.
Yeah. Okay. What are the 2 to 3 things anyone can start doing today to improve their gut health without having to overhaul their entire life?
Oh, can I have 4?
Go for it.
One thing I talk about when it comes to gut health is, because like you say, it is booming at the moment. And as a nutritionist, it just means that every wellness company is jumping on the bandwagon and it's like, what do I do? And so I always say, like, if you've got the expendable income and you want to buy your Messis and your Ronaldos and get all your goal scorers, go for your life, right? And they might be kicking it in the back of the net, but unless you have a strong back four, that scoreline is always going to be not in your favor. You are going to concede goal after goal after goal. And my strong back four are diet. So that is a high fiber plant, lots of plant diversity and hydration sort of diet. That would be the focus. Exercise, your gut microbiome, love exercise. And I don't mean everyone, insufferable person on the internet is running for a half marathon these days. I don't mean you need to go and run for a half marathon, but just, take the stairs rather than the elevator, park your car a little bit further away, just throw the remote control further away. So you've got to get up to, fast forward through the adverts. Those little things can go a long way in terms of just helping your gut be happy with the movement that you are doing each and every day. Sleep. If we could prioritize sleep, that your gut bugs would be very, very, very happy with you. And also stress management. So utilizing the breath. So tools that I know are in our back pocket, but often go out the window. And the minute life gets a little bit busy, we want to go for the goal scorers and anything that can kind of just be a silver bullet, but there really isn't one. And although I know they sound simple, it isn't easy. And you're going to have to be the coach and understand which one needs to kind of step up at certain places. And sometimes someone's got to, tap out and sub out for a minute while the life is really busy. And okay, well then can I get a few more steps in today if, I can't get to the supermarket and these kind of things and I'm on the go.
Definitely. Yeah, you're absolutely right. All those 4 things you mentioned. And then optimizing with things like Yakult and other things that you can put on top. Definitely. I think my takeaway from today is definitely going to be focused more like, what are you doing today to help your microbiome, Melissa? You know what I mean? I think if I lead with that question every single day, then, okay, I can do a bit of stress management. I could do definitely more steps. I find it so difficult to get steps in. I'm just sat down all day. I think it's so difficult.
I think that's a great question because people often think like, when you're sitting down for a meal, it's not just pregnant people that are eating for 2. You are literally eating for trillions and trillions of bacteria every single time.
And all they care about is you.
Yes, they're looking after you, so make sure you look after them.
Exactly. With Yakult, should you be taking it first thing in the morning on an empty stomach, or is there an optimized way of taking it?
No, not necessarily. Whatever would fit in with your day-to-day schedule. Most people find it best thing in the morning because, they're at home, it's in the fridge, it's one of the first things that they see. So it's kind of like up and go.
Okay, we have now come to nearly the end, but what I like to do is do like a bit of myth busting, which is a bit of fun. So yeah, they don't need to be long answers, but just give me your take on some of these. So true or false, is your poo the ultimate gut health report card?
True.
True.
Yeah.
And what should we be looking for? What's like gold standard A star? You've got first class honours in poo. What should we be kind of looking for?
I love this question because honestly, there's all these gut microbiome at home tests and things, and it's like one of the best indicators. Just like look in the toilet. I don't know why I lifted the loo then as well. So yeah, you want a smooth or slightly cracked brown sausage-like shape coming out. Any red flags would be red or black in your poo, and obviously sort of no pain or difficulty, sort of or straining and things like this. That's what you're looking for.
Okay, and if it's at the other end of the spectrum, too loose, then it's what? Not enough fibre or some kind of like diarrhea or bug? So,
yeah, well, very hard for me to say.
Who knows?
But yeah, I think it's, if you have a significant change in your bowel habits in terms of consistency, but also length of time for which you are going. So if you are someone who typically goes 3 times a week, and that can be normal for you, but then all of a sudden you're going 3 times a day. If that persists, then absolutely go and speak to your GP. And I think people always get worried about going to speak to their GP about poo, but I just assure you that they are so happy talking about this. So please, if you ever see any of these sort of red flags, please go, because they will not feel any of the awkwardness that you are feeling.
It sounds gross, but I'm always looking in my little girl's nappy and I'm like, it's gold standard poo, that one. Do you know what I mean? and then I'm like, oh, she needs a bit more water or whatever, fiber, if it's like too hard and like pebbles or whatever.
Yeah, we love that. It's a great indicator.
Yeah. So if it's like more like little bits, what do we need to add into the diet? More fats, more fiber?
Possibly more fiber, but also possibly more hydration. Again, really difficult for me to say, but keep an eye on it. And again, bowel habits are what is normal for you, and it's more looking at a change in that would be a big indicator as well.
Okay, brilliant. Kombucha, kimchi, and kefir. Are we just drinking and eating these because they're trendy, or do they actually work?
I think it's funny that they're trendy because they've literally been consumed for humans for like 14,000 years. So I think that they're great to add to your diet. You know, if your tummy isn't too sensitive to them, you know, there's some really exciting research looking at the fermented foods, particularly on that kind of gut-brain axis and things like memory and how that can improve. So yeah, they can absolutely help diversify your gut microbiome.
Okay. Can you really reset your gut in 3 days with a cleanse or detox?
No. Don't do that, please. Can we add just them and just put them in the bin, please?
So cleanses and detoxes, just like it's nonsense.
Like, completely. So like the rainforest analogy, you're just extinguishing that whole ecosystem. So no one wants deforestation, right?
What about fasting?
Fasting, we're hit and miss at the moment. A lot of the research is in men, classic. But in terms of the impact on the gut microbiome, it really is inconclusive at the moment. Sometimes we see it can increase the gut microbiome diversity. In other cases, not so much. I think particularly with your audience being women, there are times in our cycle where it just might not be, we might not feel like we can do it as much, particularly sort of in our luteal phase. So just kind of keep an eye on that. If you've got a partner that's like, I've just done a 36-hour fast.
Yeah, that's me, yeah. Yeah. That's literally me. 36 hours, 48 hours. I'm like,
wow.
Good for you. Yeah, okay. What is something that you eat regularly that would totally surprise our listeners?
I have a massive sweet tooth. So I have chocolate every day, basically.
Is it Cadbury's dairy milk chocolate or is it like, you know, some really nice organic green and blacks?
It is dark chocolate, yeah. Because dark chocolate contains I just prefer the taste of it. And that's the one thing, like I think people are surprised because I am someone, you know, I'm a nutritionist. Health and nutrition is a big part of my life, but it's not, you know, my entire life. And I'm still a 30-year-old something and enjoy a glass of wine with my girlfriends on a Friday. And I also, you know, have cake on my birthday. You know, I eat really everything almost.
Yeah, that's good. It's a good way to be, isn't it? You know it, but sometimes you just want to treat yourself. Like white chocolate is just full of sugar, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not actually chocolate. There's no cocoa solids in it at all.
It's amazing. Yeah. I love it.
Oh, do you? No, it's too.
Love it.
Although I have a sweet tooth, that's
ever get it because, but I love it. Oh my God, I love it.
Have it then. It's soul food.
No.
Still good for you.
I'll feel bad.
Okay.
There's no point. What's a gut health trend you wish would die already?
Oh, great question. I'm
trying to think of one myself that I see everywhere.
I think those cleanses, I really want them to die a death.
What's that one that's like, is it the Danish cleanse or something that's like lemon water for 3 days? I don't know. Someone on the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills did it. It's something like that, the Danish cleanse or don't know. It's like lemon water for 3 days and maybe like a bit of mint tea. That's it.
That one can go straight in the bin.
Yeah. No. Okay, cool. How do you feel about celery juice? Blessing or BS?
BS.
This is my other question, actually. Like with juicing. Okay. Me, instinctively, again, don't know if this is right, but I want the fibre, I want the roughage in my food.
Yeah.
If I was going to do it, then I would be doing a smoothie, which everything's kept in rather than juicing.
Yeah, I think if juicing is something that you enjoy and as in people making their own sort of juices and, you know, getting on their health kick and feeling like the ultimate wellness goddess, then you go for your life. But yeah, absolutely. You want the roughage, you want the fiber. That's why smoothie making can be fantastic, actually. And people often get like, yeah, but if I smoothie it, then my blood sugars are going to spike. But actually, if you pair it with, you know, a fat, so put a nut butter in there, you know, even berries, actually, we even see they can have a lower glycemic index, because you know how berries, raspberries and strawberries, they have all these seeds in. When you smoothie them and you start breaking them up, you're actually releasing some of those fibers that are usually encased within the cell wall. So you actually get more fiber, more bang for your buck, and you get a lower kind of sugar response. So yeah, I think smoothies are a great way to go as well.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of these juiced week-long detoxes.
Oh no, I don't want those.
You know, the Jason Vale stuff. I just think shut up, mate. No, it doesn't work for me. That's just like sugar water for a week. That's what I think anyway.
I just think food is just such, I mean, I'm a nutritionist. I just went into food because I loved it. But like, it is just such a privilege to be able to eat. Like, if you look at every other animal, like they just kind of feed on grass and things like this. And we get to experience all of this food. I'm like, why do you just want a juice? Like,
no, I know.
Look at all of this deliciousness.
And I just stick to the kind of try and eat it in the way that Mother Nature intended realistically.
Yeah.
As close to that as possible.
And I think on that point as well, like slowing down, like in terms of like tools in your toolbox, breath work is one, but also like eating rate. Like slowing down, chewing your food. It's a massive one when you start having fiber, because, you know, the digestion process starts in the mouth, and you kind of want to you should be chewing 20 times.
Nobody
every
does
month.
that.
Nobody. I grew up with two older brothers, you know, if you didn't eat quick, you didn't eat.
My
You know,
partner
it's
is
like
the quickest eater I've ever seen. He's sped me up
but
now.
eating rate can, you know, have an impact.
Whereas my mum will take like an hour to eat. Oh my
classy.
God. Yeah. That's too slow. Okay, is gluten the devil, or is it just misunderstood?
Misunderstood, yes. I obviously mentioned it in the case of sort of endo, but no, gluten-containing cereals, whole grains, fantastic for gut health.
This is just a personal question. Is Weetabix okay?
Yeah.
I love Weetabix.
I think they can be quite like sugary. They can be quite sugary.
I just do one Weetabix with a bit of milk, like the original Weetabix, not the like ones that have added chocolate or this, that, or the other, just original Weetabix.
Yeah. Do you know what? I've never eaten Weetabix. I've never enjoyed it.
You're missing
I think
out.
I'd like Oatabix. I'm a big oat. Yeah.
Love them. Well, that's the other thing. I see loads of bad press about oats now, and I'm like, what?
It's the blood sugars. Don't get me started. We need another hour now.
No. Well, I see a lot of glucose goddess stuff, and I think, a lot of this is outrageous. Like, outrageous. I actually don't agree with a lot of she says.
So I think some of her messaging it's not incorrect, but we've known it for ages. It's just wrapped up in something else at the moment. And I have a real frustration with the amount of scaremongering that happens.
She goes on about blood sugar spikes all the time. Like, you've just eaten food, you're going to get a blood sugar spike no matter what.
One more time for the people at the back that didn't hear you.
Fucking hell, yeah. It doesn't matter if it's banana. That's okay.
Yes. Like that is what is classed as a glucose spike. I am just like, no, that is a normal physiological response to you eating blueberries. If only our population had a problem with eating too many blueberries, you know, that is not the case. And I heard someone say this the other day, and he actually was type 1 diabetic. And he said, you know, when people are walking around with all these continuous glucose monitors, he was like, it's like if you have a functioning pancreas, you know, and you're wearing these continuous glucose monitors to check if your blood sugars are in normal range. He's like, it's like walking around with a guide dog, but having normal vision. Like, why would you do that? Like, and I was like, that is such a great point. Why, you know, that in terms of the research, these kind of like peaks, troughs, we don't have it in terms of healthy people as to whether or not that is actually having an impact, detrimental impact on health. Yes, absolutely. In sort of diseased and compromised populations like type 2 diabetic and kind of pre-diabetes, we know it can be a massive concern. But if you talk to kind of researchers in the diabetes space, they'll often say, you know, are these blood glucose spikes, you know, a symptom, not necessarily the cause of the condition that these individuals are experiencing. So.
Yeah, I'm glad you've said that. Just, I've never been on that bandwagon of these glucose monitors. I think they're absolutely nuts.
I knew we could be friends.
Yeah. And I'm just like, what does it matter? And then I've heard people, big podcasters who I've invested in companies, and they're like, oh yeah, well, I didn't realize. I was like, yeah, I'm really intolerant to like bananas because my blood sugar's spiking too much. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about, mate? That is complete misinformation whatsoever. And if you didn't know that, it wouldn't have any effect on your life anyway.
Correct.
Nuts.
Correct.
Yeah, whatever. Stupid. Okay, cool. What's one healthy food you think actually messes up a lot of people's digestion?
Tricky. I think the one thing, because we haven't touched on it, that I'm just going to answer that question with is probably green powders, because they are just kind of everywhere as well at the moment. And they are just seen as this, yet again, silver bullet. And the issue I have with green powders is, you know, they claim to, in that one scoop in the morning, meet all your nutritional needs. And I look at the back of this packet and I'm like, that is just completely flawed. You know, they'll have all your vitamins, all your minerals, all your nutrients all in one. And what they have failed to, I'll consult a dietitian or nutritionist on, is that different nutrients, different vitamins and minerals compete for the same absorption channel. So magnesium and calcium and iron, they are competing, which means that it is very unlikely that you are meeting all your nutritional needs in that one scoop. Also, you know, a lot of vitamins are fat soluble, so you need a fat alongside them. And then I look at them and they've got like prebiotics and probiotics in, and I look at the amount and I'm like, that is so small.
You could literally just eat a strawberry and have the same amount.
And it's so small, like in compared to like when we look at the effect, like if we look at research on prebiotics, probiotics, it's in much higher quantities. And I'm just like, wow, that's a lot of money to quite literally be pissing away, because you know, your body is then trying to get rid of the vitamins that you don't need so much anymore. So if you are taking green powders and all of a sudden your wee is fluorescent in the morning, that's the reason. Your body's trying to excrete what it doesn't need anymore, because by and large, with obviously some exceptions, vitamin D being one, that you know, you can get almost all of your nutrients from a well-balanced diet for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whole food diet.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've always said that about green powders. I know it's billed as like an insurance policy, but I'm just not buying it. I really do not. And then, you know, sometimes how are these products made? They could have a lot of lead in them or heavy metals, and you just don't know. And I always see this actually with a lot of like multivitamins as well. I always think this as well. You know, there's lots of products out there that are billed as like, oh, this is your one sachet that you only need to take, and it's like a woman's multivitamin. Again, just like you said, with loads of different things in it. It might have 48 different things in it, or it might have 10 different or 12 different things in it. And I'm a bit like you. I'm a bit like, you could probably get all that from your diet anyway.
Yeah, I think when it comes to kind of supplements and these kind of things, and like you say, if you look on the back of the packet, it's kind of like quite overwhelming. If you don't know why you're taking something, and I mean pretty much every ingredient on that list, then don't take it. That would be my biggest advice. If you are taking something and you don't know why, kind of stop taking it and see, you know, if you do want to try something, try it out, but start seeing if you are feeling different, you know. But, you know, placebo effect will do a lot for you.
And I used to take loads of like prebiotics and probiotics. I used to spend fortunes on it, like a lot of money. And then I thought, I stopped doing it because I was like, I know I could do this for my diet. I eat a lot of Greek yogurt. Is that any good?
Yeah, great. Especially if you're looking, like it probably is a live one.
We could go on for hours and hours, Emily. I've really, really, really enjoyed our chat today.
Me too.
I think it's been absolutely brilliant. This has been one of my favourite podcasts I've ever done. I've really geeked out with you. You have confirmed lots of things I already thought that I knew instinctively, and I thought, yes, vindicated. So yeah, thank you so much for coming up today.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks so much.
Brilliant. Thank you.